We're reevaluating in the company, and we really need to embark on a culture change that is something more than just a poster on the wall.
Boeing just pulled the trigger to crush the U.S. aviation industry. We're talking about mass layoffs. The company is charting a bold new course under the leadership of its freshly appointed CEO. With the aerospace giant facing a critical juncture, this leadership change comes at a time when trust in the company is at an all-time low. The new CEO is tasked not only with stabilizing Boeing in the wake of past controversies, but also with steering it back to its roots as a symbol of American manufacturing excellence. This decision is not going to be popular, but will it save Boeing? Let's get started. Factory closures and offshoring. In a bold and unprecedented move, Kelly Ortberg, the president and CEO of Boeing, announced a sweeping decision to close all US-based Boeing shadow factories, signaling a significant shift in the company's operational strategy. This will affect 10% of Boeing's total staff. This decision is part of a broader response to newly imposed tariffs and shifting trade policies that have drastically altered the landscape for American manufacturers. With the closure of these domestic factories, Boeing is not just downsizing its operations in the United States, it is also making a conscious decision to relocate a substantial portion of its manufacturing processes overseas. This strategic shift is aimed at mitigating the effects of recent trade policies, protecting Boeing's global competitiveness, and responding to the escalating tensions in international trade. Guess what started this? Yes, President Trump's tariffs.
From a popular governor to the most unpopular governor in the entire United States of America.
The catalyst for these changes lies in the aggressive trade policies implemented by the US government, especially in relation to tariffs on key trading partners, including China.
That China is targeting here. Boeing is the biggest U.S. exporter.
Tariffs on aerospace components, as high as 145% for certain parts, have placed a heavy burden on Boeing's manufacturing and supply chains. These tariffs, intended to protect U.S. industries and reduce trade deficits, have made the cost of producing aircraft in the U.S. increasingly prohibitive for Boeing, pushing the company to reconsider its domestic manufacturing footprint. With the closure of its U.S. shadow factories, Boeing has committed to moving a significant portion of its operations overseas. Countries such as Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom have emerged as new centers for Boeing's manufacturing activities. These nations offer a combination of favorable trade agreements, lower labor costs, and established aerospace industries, making them attractive alternatives for Boeing. By shifting production to these locations, Boeing aims to lower its production costs and remain competitive in the global market, particularly in the face of rising tariff barriers in the US. These shadow factories are auxiliary production sites that operate alongside or in support of its main manufacturing plants. These facilities are typically not part of the core public-facing manufacturing footprint, which is why they're called shadow factories. They're less visible but play a crucial role in scaling production, managing overflow, or addressing bottlenecks in critical programs. Boeing has used them strategically during periods of high demand or when its main assembly lines were stretched thin, such as during the ramp-up of the 737 MAX or when compensating for supply chain disruptions. These shadow factories can be subcontractor-backed facilities embedded within or near Boeing's supply chain network, often run by Tier 1 or Tier 2 suppliers, but under Boeing's direct oversight. Or they can be temporarily leased industrial spaces staffed with Boeing or contract labor designed to assemble specific parts or systems outside of the mainline workflow. Boeing also has repurposed facilities within its own real estate portfolio, set up to serve specialized tasks like testing, quality control, or niche manufacturing of fuselage sections, wing parts, or avionics. Their primary purpose has been to allow Boeing to isolate problems, avoid production gridlock, and maintain delivery schedules in the face of unexpected delays. For example, when Spirit AeroSystems faced setbacks in delivering fuselage parts for the 737 MAX, shadow operations helped buffer the supply gap without halting final assembly in Renton. However, running multiple decentralized operations adds overhead, complexity, and inconsistency. In recent years, especially amid mounting pressure to cut costs and streamline operations, Boeing began re-evaluating the efficiency of these shadow factories. The recent announcement to shut many of them down reflects a shift toward tighter centralization, leaner manufacturing, and possibly even a realignment of where Boeing sees long-term industrial growth. The decision to offshore these operations, while economically motivated, has not been without controversy. The closure of US-based factories has already led to the loss of thousands of jobs, primarily in states that rely heavily on Boeing's manufacturing presence. Cities such as Seattle, where Boeing has historically had a strong presence, are facing significant economic challenges as a result of the factory closures.
So we need to right size and be efficient, and I think we need to continue to do that.
The loss of these high-skilled jobs is particularly impactful, given Boeing's role as one of the largest employers in the aerospace sector. In total, thousands of employees who were once part of Boeing's US workforce now face an uncertain future, contributing to growing concerns about the decline of American manufacturing and the erosion of jobs that were once considered staples of the US economy. Boeing remains focused on restoring its competitiveness in the global aerospace market. The company is banking on its ability to produce high-quality aircraft at a lower cost, which will help it secure new contracts and maintain existing ones.
To stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
Furthermore, by diversifying its manufacturing operations across multiple countries, Boeing hopes to reduce its reliance on any one market and create a more resilient business model that can weather the uncertainties of international trade. The company's ability to manage this transition will have significant implications not only for its own future, but also for the broader US manufacturing sector. As Boeing and other companies adjust to the realities of international trade, the question remains whether US industry can find a way to thrive in the global marketplace. So, why did all of this happen, and where does the company go from here? Boeing's predicament and domestic fallout. Boeing, one of the most prominent symbols of American manufacturing prowess, finds itself at a critical juncture, grappling with the intense pressures of global trade, escalating tariffs, and a rapidly changing economic landscape. The tariffs implemented by the Trump administration have significantly increased the cost of materials and components that are critical to Boeing's aircraft production.
All goods coming in to the United States from China.
For a company that produces sophisticated, high-value products like commercial airplanes, the impact of these tariffs cannot be overstated. The cost of materials, ranging from aluminum to titanium, has surged, eating into Boeing's profit margins and making it increasingly difficult to price its products competitively in a global market. These tariffs, which were introduced as part of the broader strategy to protect domestic industries from unfair foreign competition, have instead created a dire economic situation for Boeing, raising serious questions about the long-term sustainability of its operations in the US. Faced with the prospect of losing its competitive edge in the international aerospace market, Boeing was forced to take drastic action. The company's decision to close multiple US-based factories and shift production to overseas locations marks a dramatic pivot in its strategy. To better understand this move, one needs to look at some context. For instance, in 2024, Boeing reported a revenue of approximately $108.5 billion. Interestingly, just 41.83% of this came from domestic operations within the United States, translating to around $45.38 billion. The majority, 58.17%, or roughly $63.12 billion, originated from international markets. Boeing is not just an American aerospace giant, it is a global enterprise deeply embedded in the economic fabric of multiple regions. Breaking down these international revenues reveals a significant concentration in high-growth areas. Europe accounted for around $10.52 billion, or 9.7% of Boeing's total revenue, while Asia, excluding China, generated $10.01 billion, or 9.23%. The Middle East contributed $6.59 billion, Latin America $1.52 billion, Canada $1.26 billion, Oceania $1.66 billion, and Africa $825 million. Boeing's own long-term forecasts show that emerging markets in Asia and the Middle East are set to experience the highest increases in both commercial aviation demand and defense procurement. In regions like East and South Asia, rising middle-class populations and surging e-commerce are fueling unprecedented growth in air travel and cargo. According to Boeing's 2024 World Air Cargo Forecast, global air cargo traffic is expected to grow at an average rate of 4% annually through 2043. By that year, the global freighter fleet is projected to grow to approximately 3,900 aircraft, representing a two-thirds increase from 2023. Much of this growth is expected to originate from Asia, where nations are not only expanding their aviation networks, but are also investing in airport infrastructure, logistics hubs, and aerospace capabilities. In the Middle East, Boeing foresees a substantial uptick in defense-related sales. Countries across the region are ramping up military spending and seeking advanced systems to modernize their air forces and enhance regional security. Boeing's defense platforms, including the F-15 fighter jet, Chinook heavy-lift helicopter, and Apache attack helicopter, align perfectly with this growing demand. As regional governments pursue strategic autonomy and technological superiority, Boeing's presence in the Middle East is evolving from that of a supplier to a long-term industrial partner. Relocating parts of Boeing's manufacturing capacity to these markets is not merely about chasing revenue, it is also a means of achieving operational efficiency. Labor costs in countries like Malaysia, India, and certain Gulf states are significantly lower than in the US, allowing for reduced overhead and increased margins. Moreover, producing closer to end users shortens delivery timelines, reduces transportation expenses, and helps circumvent trade restrictions that may arise from US-imposed tariffs or foreign retaliatory measures. It's a total win-win for Boeing and its customers. Many emerging economies are eager to welcome global players like Boeing, offering attractive incentive packages, tax holidays, streamlined regulatory approvals, and sometimes even partial infrastructure development. Governments in countries such as India, Vietnam, Malaysia, the UAE, Brazil, and Poland frequently offer cash grants, low-interest loans, or subsidies to cover part of the capital investment Boeing would need to set up a plant or R&D center. For example, a government might directly offer millions of dollars in funding for factory construction, technology transfer, or employee training programs. Moreover, host countries often allow companies like Boeing to operate tax-free for a fixed number of years, typically 5 to 10, or apply dramatically reduced tax rates on profits from export operations. This is a major financial incentive compared to US federal and state tax burdens. On top of this, emerging markets often establish single-window clearances, or special economic zones where environmental permits, labor registrations, and customs processes are fast-tracked. These streamlined processes reduce bureaucratic delays and make it faster and easier for Boeing to set up or scale operations. In some cases, governments co-invest in infrastructure such as roads, power supply, utilities, or even airports near the manufacturing site. For example, a country might build a new logistics park or extend a highway network specifically to support Boeing's new plant. Many countries also have offset requirements or local content rules, especially in defense or national aviation contracts. This means that Boeing must manufacture a certain percentage of the product domestically if it wants to win a government contract for fighter jets, commercial aircraft, or satellites. Local production, therefore, is strategically necessary to secure major deals. However, Boeing's move comes at a significant cost, particularly for the communities that have been built around the company's US factories. Cities and towns that have relied heavily on Boeing for employment, economic stability, and tax revenue now face the prospect of economic devastation. Boeing's presence in these areas is not just an economic engine, it has often been the primary employer, supporting everything from local businesses to schools, hospitals, and other essential services. With the closure of shadow factories, Tens of thousands of employees who have spent their entire careers working for Boeing are being displaced. These long-serving workers, many of whom have specialized skills that are difficult to transfer to other industries, now find themselves without jobs and facing a precarious future. The ripple effect of Boeing's decision extends far beyond the company itself. Local economies that have thrived in Boeing's shadow are now bracing for a sharp downturn. Businesses that once depended on Boeing's steady demand for goods and services are struggling to stay afloat. Restaurants, retailers, service providers, and construction companies that relied on the income generated by Boeing employees are seeing a sharp decline in revenue. Schools and hospitals, which have historically been funded by the local tax base, supported by Boeing's presence, are also feeling the strain. The sudden loss of jobs and tax revenue is placing immense pressure on these institutions, which are now faced with the challenge of continuing to operate amidst a rapidly shrinking local economy. The political debate surrounding Boeing's predicament is as polarized as the trade policies that led to the company's current crisis. Supporters of the tariffs argue that these measures were necessary to correct decades of trade imbalances and protect American industries from unfair foreign competition. They believe that the tariffs will force other countries, particularly China, to play by the same rules and provide American manufacturers with a fairer playing field. In the case of Boeing, proponents of the tariffs contend that the company's shift to offshoring is a consequence of unfair global trade practices, rather than a failure of U.S. economic policy. On the other hand, critics of the tariffs argue that these policies were poorly conceived and have had unintended consequences, particularly for U.S. manufacturers like Boeing. They contend that the tariffs failed to account for the complexities of globalization and the interconnectedness of global supply chains. For companies like Boeing, which rely on international suppliers and customers, tariffs disrupt a finely tuned system of production that has been decades in the making. Critics also point out that the tariffs have placed a heavy burden on consumers who ultimately bear the cost of higher prices on goods like airplanes, automobiles, and electronics. Boeing, after all, is a business, and businesses work for profit. Boeing's justification. The global aerospace giant, once a cornerstone of American industrial strength, has found itself grappling with unprecedented challenges in a rapidly changing global economy. The pressures of rising production costs, retaliatory tariffs, and increasingly complex global supply chains have created an untenable situation for Boeing's continued US-based operations. For Boeing, as for many corporations facing the same challenges, the shift to international operations is a calculated move to safeguard the company's long-term survival in an unpredictable trade environment. Over the past several years, Boeing has faced mounting difficulties in maintaining a cost-competitive production model within the United States. One of the key challenges for Boeing has been the imposition of tariffs by foreign governments in retaliation for US trade policies. These tariffs, levied by major trading partners like the European Union and China, have significantly increased the cost of raw materials, components, and finished goods that Boeing imports. The disruption to Boeing's supply chain, particularly as it pertains to high-tech components and specialized materials, has been one of the key drivers behind the decision to relocate some of its manufacturing processes abroad. The US-China trade war, which began in earnest in 2018, set the stage for an extended period of uncertainty. With both countries imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods, the aerospace sector was hit particularly hard, as key suppliers to Boeing faced increased costs, threatening the company's competitive edge. This volatility in global trade dynamics made the stability of Boeing's US production base increasingly unsustainable. Beyond the tariffs, Boeing has also had to contend with the broader consequences of disrupted supply chains, which have further complicated its ability to maintain a steady flow of production. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated these issues, revealing just how fragile the global supply chain system had become, with the aerospace sector being one of the hardest hit. Boeing found itself unable to secure the necessary parts promptly, and delays in the delivery of critical components, coupled with rising shipping costs, put the company's entire production timeline at risk. The decision to shift certain manufacturing processes to regions with more reliable supply chains, lower labor costs, and more favorable trade environments became a logical response. By offshoring a portion of its production, Boeing hoped to mitigate some of these supply chain disruptions and regain a more stable footing in the global market. Amid these practical concerns, Boeing's leadership has also been forced to confront the broader question of its corporate priorities. For many companies in today's globalized economy, the obligation to shareholders has often taken precedence over patriotic duty. This is particularly evident in Boeing's case, as the company faces increasing pressure from investors to maintain profitability and shareholder returns. In this context, Boeing's leadership has openly reaffirmed its commitment to shareholders, emphasizing that the company's primary responsibility is to its investors rather than nationalistic ideals. While Boeing remains an iconic American brand, the economic realities of the 21st century dictate that corporations must operate with an eye on global competitiveness. As trade policies and international relations evolve, companies like Boeing are forced to make decisions that prioritize market access, cost savings, and global strategy over national loyalty. This has led some critics to argue that the company's focus on maximizing shareholder value at the expense of maintaining a significant domestic presence undermines its role as a symbol of American industrial strength. Boeing's decision to reduce its US-based manufacturing footprint and shift production overseas reflects the broader vulnerabilities within the American industrial ecosystem. Over the past 4 decades, the US has experienced a significant decline in manufacturing employment, with the sector shedding millions of jobs as the economy transitioned towards service-oriented industries. This decline has been particularly pronounced in sectors requiring high levels of skilled labor and substantial technological investment. The erosion of domestic manufacturing capabilities, coupled with the increasing complexity of global supply chains, has made it challenging for companies like Boeing to maintain large-scale production within the US. The reliance on international suppliers, while offering short-term cost benefits, has introduced long-term risks to economic security. For instance, the US faces a projected shortfall of 2.1 million manufacturing jobs by 2030 due to a lack of skilled labor. Boeing's shift to offshore production is indicative of a broader trend where corporate loyalty is increasingly aligned with market profitability rather than national allegiance. The global nature of modern business necessitates that companies navigate diverse regulatory environments, labor conditions, and economic realities. In this context, Boeing's operations in the US are part of a larger strategy aimed at maximizing profitability and ensuring access to advantageous global markets. This market-driven approach is not unique to Boeing, but reflects a wider shift across industries, where economic pressures demand global flexibility over national loyalty. The challenges facing US manufacturing are further compounded by the country's dependence on global supply chains. The COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent geopolitical tensions have exposed the fragility of these supply chains, highlighting the risks associated with over-reliance on foreign suppliers. Efforts to reshore manufacturing and invest in automation have been hampered by high costs and a shortage of skilled labor. In short, Boeing's exit was all but inevitable. Operational shifts within Boeing. In response to rising production costs and the need for greater flexibility in an increasingly competitive aerospace industry, Boeing has restructured its operational philosophy. These changes are, in many ways, a break from the traditional manufacturing methods that once defined the company's approach, and they are largely driven by the company's need to remain competitive in the global marketplace. One of the most notable shifts has been Boeing's ability to operate free from certain American regulations and labor contracts. This newfound freedom has allowed the company to experiment with new manufacturing techniques, including modular manufacturing. Traditionally, Boeing's manufacturing process followed a linear model where each stage of production was carefully coordinated in a series of steps. However, This linear model has become less efficient over time as the company faces pressures related to cost and time. By adopting modular manufacturing, Boeing can produce smaller, standardized components that can be assembled into larger parts more efficiently.
They've also changed their bonus structure. Instead of being focused primarily on hitting financial metrics.
This flexibility allows the company to scale production based on demand, reduce waste, and streamline its assembly process. Along with modular manufacturing, Boeing has embraced digital-first techniques, shifting away from traditional methods that relied heavily on physical models and prototypes. By integrating digital technology into nearly every aspect of its production process, Boeing has significantly enhanced its design capabilities. The use of 3D printing, digital twin technology, and advanced simulation tools has allowed Boeing to design, test, and optimize components virtually before ever manufacturing them. This has not only sped up the design process, but also reduced the need for costly and time-consuming physical testing, helping to lower production costs in the long run. Another major shift in Boeing's operational strategy has been its movement away from traditional linear production lines toward agile, reconfigurable manufacturing systems. This agile approach is a significant departure from the static production lines that have long been associated with large-scale manufacturing. Instead of a fixed assembly line where components move in a preordained sequence, Boeing's new system allows for greater flexibility in how parts are produced and assembled. Reconfigurable systems enable Boeing to adjust production schedules quickly in response to changing demand or disruptions in the supply chain. This reconfigurability has also led to advancements in component production, particularly in the parallel production of parts. Boeing has invested heavily in technologies that allow for the simultaneous production of multiple components, reducing the time needed for assembly. This shift has accelerated production speed and improved the efficiency of the overall manufacturing process. As part of its operational shift, Boeing has formed new partnerships with local firms across Asia and Europe. These partnerships are part of a broader strategy to optimize the company's global supply chain and reduce its reliance on US-based manufacturing. In Asia, Boeing has established partnerships with suppliers in countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea, enabling the company to tap into the region's growing aerospace capabilities. These local collaborations have allowed Boeing to leverage the region's competitive advantages in terms of cost and efficiency, while helping to foster local economic growth. In Europe, Boeing has worked closely with local aerospace manufacturers to enhance its capabilities in composite materials and propulsion systems. Another area of focus for Boeing's operational restructuring has been the introduction of innovative materials and alternative propulsion systems. As part of its ongoing commitment to sustainability and efficiency, Boeing has worked to integrate new materials such as lightweight composites and advanced metals into its aircraft designs. These materials offer significant advantages in terms of fuel efficiency, as lighter planes require less energy to operate. Additionally, Boeing has been exploring alternative propulsion technologies, including electric and hybrid engines, as the aerospace industry moves toward a future of more environmentally friendly aircraft. These developments are expected to play a crucial role in helping Boeing meet increasingly stringent environmental regulations and fulfill the growing demand for sustainable aviation. Perhaps one of the most significant shifts in Boeing's operational philosophy is the rise of open architecture in its design and production processes. Open architecture refers to a modular and flexible system that allows different parts of an aircraft to be designed independently and later integrated seamlessly into a larger system. This approach has paved the way for greater global collaboration and innovation, as it enables Boeing to tap into a wider pool of expertise and resources. By opening up its design processes to external suppliers, partners, and innovators, Boeing can accelerate the development of new technologies and incorporate cutting-edge ideas from a variety of fields. But this will have its costs for both Boeing and the United States. Decline of Boeing's presence in the US. Boeing's operational shifts and strategic decisions in recent years have significantly impacted the global aerospace industry and domestic communities in the United States. In 2024, Boeing faced substantial financial setbacks, reporting a net loss of $11.8 billion, marking its second largest annual deficit. This was attributed to production delays, regulatory challenges, and labor disruptions, including a 53-day strike by union workers. The company's revenue fell by 14% to $66.5 billion, and it experienced a negative free cash flow of $14.3 billion. These challenges opened opportunities for competitors. Airbus capitalized on Boeing's struggles, surpassing it in both orders and deliveries. In 2024, Airbus delivered 766 aircraft, while Boeing managed only 348, marking the sixth consecutive year Boeing trailed behind. Airbus's A321XLR dominated the mid-market segment, further sidelining Boeing's efforts to regain ground. Embraer, the Brazilian aerospace company, also made significant strides.
Airbus facility in Broughton in North Wales. Here is where they manufacture aircraft wings, and a lot of them.
In 2024, Embraer delivered 206 aircraft, a 14% increase from the previous year, and plans to nearly double its revenue to $10 billion by the end of the decade through increased sales of regional and business jets. The company is considering developing a new narrow-body aircraft to challenge Boeing and Airbus's dominance in the large jet market, though such a project would require substantial investment and is not expected before the mid to late 2030s. To compete, Boeing has reduced its presence in the US, but this has had profound economic and social consequences, particularly in mid-sized cities and suburban communities. The closure of facilities led to job losses, causing real estate and property values to plummet in affected areas. Public school districts faced sudden budget shortfalls due to decreased tax revenues, impacting educational programs and resources. Boeing's departure also meant the loss of STEM education and career development programs that the company had supported, disrupting talent pipelines and local workforce development. Boeing's shift of manufacturing operations overseas has sparked serious national security concerns, particularly regarding the Pentagon's defense capabilities and supply chain resilience. With Boeing supplying around 30% of US military aircraft and space systems, its reduced domestic presence threatens to weaken the defense industrial base, especially during military mobilizations. The globalization of Boeing's supply chain increases vulnerability to foreign political instability, trade disputes, and logistical delays, exemplified by US-China tensions and rising tariffs affecting Boeing's Chinese operations. Additionally, relocating production to countries with weaker intellectual property protections elevates the risk of sensitive defense technology being compromised. In response, companies like Embraer Industries, known for autonomous drones and AI-based defense solutions, are stepping in, but scaling such firms to Boeing's capacity remains a major challenge. To mitigate these threats, the Pentagon is now exploring ways to bolster domestic manufacturing. However, for now, Boeing's relocation overseas reflects a deep structural challenge in the US economic model, highlighting decades-long trends in outsourcing, deregulation, and globalization that have eroded domestic industrial sovereignty. As one of the nation's most iconic aerospace firms, contributing over $70 billion annually in revenue and supporting tens of thousands of US jobs, Boeing's withdrawal from domestic manufacturing exposes vulnerabilities in economic planning, particularly the over-reliance on a few large corporations. The move not only jeopardizes high-skill employment in regions like the Pacific Northwest, but also threatens critical sectors such as defense and advanced manufacturing, where IP protection and national security are paramount. This shift has prompted calls for the US to revamp its industrial policy by incentivizing domestic manufacturing, strengthening support for small and medium-sized enterprises, and investing in advanced technologies. For now, however, it appears that US manufacturers are jumping ship. Boeing is just one of the many tragedies in this tariff policy. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.